Jamie, have you seen the interview on LBC? It's probably not Long Beach, California. Something Britain's conversation. Have you seen the interview with Richard Dawkins? The most recent interview with Richard Dawkins.
I have a couple of times, and I'm still trying to figure out what the L stands for too. I don't know what that means.
Because that lady's head is in the way.
It's right the way. I've been waiting for her to move her head, but
Yeah, she doesn't. Yeah, I saw it too. And I think we should talk about that video today. We'll watch it, we'll discuss it, and we'll talk about the video today.
sounds great. Let's do that.
Okay. So you guys have not celebrated Easter yet. Is that the case?
Yeah, so we are today 3.5 weeks out from Holy Week, and then there's another week. So basically 4.5 weeks from our celebration of Easter, which we call Pascha, which is a reference to the Passover.
Okay.
So we still got some time. We got time.
Yeah.
It's weird this year. We're really out of sync this year with the Western churches, but that's not unexpected. It happens every now and then. So,
Yeah, we had a lengthy this past Sunday for us was Easter. Then the previous week was triumphal entry,
right.
Passover. We had a lengthy conversation in our small group about Passover and like what did Palm Sunday have to do with Passover? Like how does all of that fit together? And then someone in my small group um looked at her phone and like Googled and like she's like, well, Passover isn't for another 4 weeks. So what is that all about? So then we started talking about vernal equinoxes and full moons and all of this kind of thing. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, it honestly, it kind of there's part of me that wants to um there's kind of part of me that wants to like celebrate those things more like actual calendar wise than maybe whatever the vernal equinox rule is. Um, there's kind of part of me that wants to do that.
Well, there's a huge history to it. I couldn't even go into it here because I would misspeak. But I mean, really,
Mm,
the big question is for the Orthodox right now is
mm,
why we do what we do when we do. Um, and we would look at what the Western churches do. Not everybody would say it this way. I'll say it this way, though. There's some division about how we approach this in the Orthodox Church, but the Western churches are actually more accurate because they're following the accurate moon, the way the moon works, the way the seasons work. Whereas the Orthodox Church is what it's on the old calendar, is what we call it, the older, unupdated calendar, trying to be loyal and faithful to the thing that we were given, but it's cool in a sense because the way it was calculated has these little minor errors in it that if you stretch them out over 2000 years you end up with 13 days
mm.
off, so our clock, we're doing everything in the east, we're doing everything correctly according to what we call correct, but our watch is running slow, so it's still right, but it's not right in a way too. So I mean, what you guys do, what you're doing is what's in a sense been always been done. It was a
Mm.
huge controversy in the whatever third, fourth, fifth century, whatever it was. And because I can't remember my church history off the top of my head about when to celebrate
Okay.
Pascha. But where it's interesting, here we are, everybody, all Christians who celebrate it all, are a reflection of that long history. So there you go. You're doing it, whether you know it or not.
Well, and that's what's funny because I would say I would say Western Christians like us probably don't even give it a second thought. Um, of the
Probably
history
true.
behind it, but because it came up, like it makes me want to like I'm kind of interested in learning some of those
Yep.
details. Yeah, I don't think that most people on our like most of us, I don't, yeah, I mean it's probably ridiculous to say we don't care, but I don't think we care
Well, you kind
because
of you take it for granted. Someone's going to figure out when
hmm,
Easter is supposed to fall, right? And there's a
yeah,
rule for it.
right.
Um, it's kind of like Thanksgiving, just tell me when it is, or Mother's Day, or these things that are what we would call movable feasts. They move
Mhm.
around according to essentially monthly cycles, moon cycles.
Yeah.
And it sounds foreign until you realize like it's not at all. It's something that whether it's happening or not, it's happening.
Mhm.
So it's totally worth it. I mean, for anybody who's interested digging into it just to see the history of Christianity, because the debate was always like, do we pick one date, that Easter happens on and everybody sticks
Yeah.
with that? Or should it always happen on a Sunday? And
Mm.
that's where it fell, because Sunday is the day of resurrection, and so it always has to be celebrated on a Sunday.
Mm.
Um, which then means if you're going to celebrate Ascension, which we do, it's always going to fall on a Thursday because it's 40 days
Mm.
after the resurrection. If you're going to celebrate Pentecost, it's always on a Sunday. It's 50 days after the resurrection. So it's very interesting how it works, but they're movable. It's totally fascinating.
Yeah.
Whether you know or not, you're doing it.
Well, this is kind of a lead up to this interview, this Dawkins interview, um, because the setup on the video is it's Easter in Great Britain, and Richard Dawkins seems to be quite perturbed by the fact that the the UK is elevating the um, the Muslim holy month of Ramadan in the way that they're doing it, and like he seems perturbed about that. He seems a little miffed by
Mm,
that.
yep.
And just when I first saw the video, I just thought it was really I was really fascinated by the things he said. Um, my I would say my experience with Richard Dawkins in when we lived in Cedar Rapids, so probably 2007-ish, 2008, whenever the God Delusion came out.
Right.
I I read it. Well, I read like half of it, and the reason I read half of it was I found his argumentation like really poor.
Right.
I really felt like it was coming from someone the way he was talking about the Bible. I feel like he didn't even read it. Like he had no like, and I'm not talking about his, you know, job as a molecular biologist. I wouldn't dare speak anything on that
Yeah.
category.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I really felt like for someone who was an atheist, and in the way that he was going about his atheism, I really felt like he was really uninformed.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I mean, I can, if someone's an atheist, that like that's fine. But I feel like if you're going to talk about things that the Bible says or it purports to say, or like however he would frame that up, at least have some honesty and some authenticity behind it.
Right.
And I just like I felt like it was just so missing. Like I'm like, dude, like how can anyone who has half of an understanding of what the Bible says like say these things? Like it just didn't make any sense to me. Um, so I kind of put it down and really haven't thought about atheism or or new atheists until I saw this video. Um, and it kind of yeah, it kind of I thought it would be a good thing for us to talk about
It's
on.
a there's a huge, I mean, it's funny because even as this came out, there other people have been speaking up. I watched a video this morning between my friend Father Chris sent me, between Jonathan Pageau and I'm trying to think if I can find the video real quick so I can tell you what it was. I closed out Facebook. Oh,
Was it
Brierly.
Tom?
I think.
Was it Tom Holland?
No, it was discussing him a little bit, but it was I can't think of the guy's name. I don't want to look it up because then I'll delay it. But anyway, it was discussing the whole movement. I mean, you've seen that article in the Spectator about
Mm-hmm.
Christian revival is underway in Britain, and then
Yeah.
also too this whole discussion was about the fact that the new atheists, like multiples of them, are saying they're abandoning it because they're like there's no hope in atheism, and they're actually turning towards Christianity because they're finding in it like what they're looking for ultimately in terms of hope. Now,
Yeah.
whether that's, whether it's, you know, not crazy Christianity or not, who knows? But it's interesting. And so like with Dawkins is actually, I think he's honest, but he's a part of a dying breed. So it'll be interesting, maybe to walk through this and kind of
Yeah.
talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. So we'll just so we know that if you're watching this, like our pictures are probably up in the wrong corner and really tiny.
I
And
just figured out how to expand mine. You can kind of pull the corner down.
okay.
Maybe I'll do it on the recording. I don't know.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll find out.
Yeah. So if the video is not to your satisfaction, this is available on audio. And if the video is not to your satisfaction, I blame Zoom. Um,
Me
so
too.
we're just
Me
going to
too.
hit play on this video and we're going to just talk through it a little bit. And yeah, I'm interested. It'll be good. This will be a good conversation. So I'm just going to hit play and we'll kind of go from there. So we'll raise our hands when we want to have a conversation.
Professor Dawkins, it's very good to have you join us to discuss whether it matters that Christianity is playing a diminishing role in national life.
Okay. Does it matter? Like we're never going to get through this video.
Yeah.
And does it matter that Christianity is playing a diminishing role in life?
It's contested if that's actually true. I mean, it's demonstrable that people, at least it seems like in Britain, the
Hmm.
popular idea, in England, Britain, Great Britain, and to some degree in the States, but maybe less so, that's maybe the case, but maybe not the case,
Sure.
Welcome to LBC.
Thank you.
And what would be
Whatever that
your
means.
Easter message? I mean, I've said a few things. What would you tell the nation?
Well, I must say I was slightly horrified to hear that Ramadan is being promoted instead. I do think that we are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer, but there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. And so, I love.
That's so interesting. I mean, but it's no shock. I mean, you can be. The first thought I had when I heard this was that I've often been told, and I think it's true, that you can be a very good Jew and be completely a total atheist. And
Mhm.
I think he's demonstrating that it's like it's conceivable that you can have a Christian. It's not a faith. There's no faith there.
Mhm.
A Christian what thing, and yet I mean I think actually I look at this and I'm like I see hope because it's like
Mhm.
there's something to work with right there. Cultural Christianity to me, we used to really, I know at TFC it was really decried. Like you don't want to have that, you've got to have like this other thing. I'm like, I don't know. I think that's something to work with. If people have something in them that still sort of propels them to look at this positively, then you got something to work with.
Yeah.
But it's weird. It's super weird to see Dawkins. I mean, apparently he said this before. I didn't realize that. But
Hmm.
watching some other videos about this, but to hear him, I don't know, just expect him to sort of trash it, but he's not because I mean, as he's gonna say, he's really into a lot of that stuff. So anyway,
Yeah, because there are some, yeah, as he's gonna say, there are gonna be some implications that come out of this.
yeah,
Um, and when I watched this the first time the other day, I like on my mind immediately went to just um I think it's been like kind of known or said for a while, like wherever Europe goes, like America like sort of follows. So I think a big part of this video for me was like staring into our future.
mm,
Like this is a
right,
good window into our future.
right, right.
Hymns and Christmas carols, and um, I I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. It's true that statistically the number of people who actually believe in Christianity is going down, and I'm happy with that. But I would not be happy if, for example, we lost all our cathedrals and our beautiful parish churches. So I count myself a cultural Christian. I think it would matter if we Certainly, if we substituted any alternative religion, that would be truly dreadful.
Well, which
I mean, as an Orthodox Christian, some of that resonates with me. The sense of beauty, you
Mm,
know, he's got there. Our worship should be beautiful. Like the standards of what makes it beautiful are going to probably vary. People would argue about what that might be. Um, but it's interesting. I mean, there's nostalgia at work here. Is that all
mm,
bad? No. Is it all good? No.
mm.
Um, is it more good than bad? Probably. Um, it's weird. It's weird when someone. I mean, this is the manifestation that seeing they may not see, hearing they may not hear. You know that there's sort of
Yeah.
this not God imposing it on Dawkins, but himself, like he can see it, but he sees nothing, you know, and that's exactly what he sees is nothing. And so then he imposes on it what he likes about it. And
Mm,
it's not a bad thing. You know, how does one sing an old hymn if it's a decent one, because there's many that are very poor, that is proclaiming the gospel and like it and then sing along with it, yet I'll be changed by it. And I've seen this a million times, so I know it's possible,
yeah.
but it's always kind of shocking in a way, you know. And it's weird because the whole implications of this get twisted up into Islam, and that's a whole separate. I think to me like a separate issue even
Yeah.
than what we're getting into here. But
Yeah.
he sees Islam as a threat to this clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it would be, I knew we were going to talk about this today, and I've just been kind of rolling this throughout my head. I think it would be a mistake for people to view this and think like that Richard Dawkins is just an old white racist against Islam. Like to just cut like that's a
Yeah,
little low on the. I think that that's a little low on the tree, and it's not. I don't
yep.
feel like it's looking deeper into this, like into what he's really saying. Um,
Hmm.
and like he really is looking at like these things have value, and like buildings or hymns, like they have value. And I think what I like that you use the word nostalgia. Like I think what he's kind of wrestling with is, okay, but what's the value in those things? Like why does
Yeah.
it provide value? One of the people that I've really have just read a lot over the past few years, um, is I just love Francis Schaeffer so much. I think so many times back to winter I'm at TFC and watching him in his shorts. Um, like that's one of the big things that Schaeffer talks quite a bit about is um, when you eliminate like when you eliminate God, you have to ultimately like you have to act as though he is still real. Like there's still something that you have to like that you have
Yeah.
to as a foundation. So it's like I'm gonna and it's like first floor, second floor stuff. Like even though the first floor doesn't exist, you stinking better act like it does because you're building something on top of it. And
Hmm. Yep.
as I was
Yep.
I was kind of following this video on Twitter. There were a conversation, and I'm a big Tom Holland fan also, because he wrote this book called Dominion, which I highly recommend. Um, but Holland kind of brings up like Friedrich Nietzsche's thing of um, well, if you eliminate God, what are you going to replace him with? Um,
Yep.
and the how long does a foundation without Christ, like how long does that sustain the culture? Like if you want a Christian culture without Christ,
Yeah.
you can probably have that for a while, but how that's not
Yeah.
sustainable. Um, yeah.
Um,
me to my supplementary point, which
It's
is
a
that, as
yeah.
we know,
It
church attendance.
Go ahead.
no. I'm trying to think because when you said something, I was thinking of something when you said that. Just the idea. I mean, Christianity is different in the sense that it's, it's not simply religion,
Mm.
it's the real thing. And so I mean, but we know those Christians, other people don't. I'm reading a book called not gonna get the name of the book, Return to Reality, or I can't think of the guy's name. Porcu is his last name. A friend of ours, the parish, gave it to me. Suddenly I can't remember the title. But it talks a lot about this, about God being love, the nature of the universe being love. And when you remove all that and you just leave the trappings,
Mhm.
beautiful cathedrals, hymns, vestments, candles, incense, those things actually still have the potential to draw you back into something. But I think in the long run, the real question I think really is what is happening to Christians where or Christianity where I mean it's funny because we look at this and I think for Christians are like, whoa, in one sense it's like, wow, Dawkins is talking in one way, but what he's really doing is so alien to what we believe as Christians in general. But really this is where things are moving in so many ways in the modern Christian movement. I mean, really we're moving towards a form of what he's doing. Like
Yeah.
it's towards self-help, it's toward it's eviscerating what the church is supposed to be doing and believing and saying, and this is kind of the end result of it, when you take away the things that really are supposed to be there.
Yeah, I think there's a way to look at this. So I think there are a number of different ways to look at this. One way to look at it that I mentioned earlier, I think one faulty way to look at this would be, oh, Richard's an old white guy who hates Islam.
Yep.
So we need a bulwark against Islam, and Christianity fits that spot. I think another faulty way,
Yep.
like I appreciate what you said, like at least there's something to work with here. And
Yeah.
like, I don't know how much further I would go beyond that statement, because one way people might look at this is, oh man, Richard Dawkins is Christians always do this. Like
Yeah.
whenever someone says something that sounds remotely Christian, and not like I'm gonna say
Yeah.
like I've been guilty of this. Like whenever someone says something that's remotely, Christian or faith sounding, it's like, oh, he's one of us. And so to embrace this, um,
Yeah.
but he is, as you've said, like he's doing something that is, like I like that he's being honest about it, but he's also revealing,
Hmm.
um, kind of like this future thing, like you were talking about. Okay, I'm gonna hit play here.
Point, which is that, as we know, church attendance is plummeting, but the erection of mosques across Europe, I think 6,000 are under construction, and there are many more, I mean, are being planned. So do you regard that as a problem? Do you think that matters?
Yes, I do really. I mean, I don't, I have to choose my words carefully. I mean, if I had to choose between Christianity,
That man, I have to choose my words carefully. That is, yeah. Um, at the risk of sounding like an old white dude who is anti-Islamic. Um, yeah, I mean, he probably like literally, he probably does need to choose his words carefully.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That's a big deal. I mean, especially, I mean, that's a practical reality in England,
mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
I think I kind of felt it when I was watching it. Like I was like, oh, be careful. Not because it's like he's, what he ends up saying, I think is just demonstrating what some people feel. I think it's a realistic issue. You have a culture that's coming in, it's dominating, and it's not is as long as we treat Islam and Christianity, so here we're getting into it, as just two alternate things, and we
Mm,
don't
mm.
see them each for what they are, then it's gonna just be a racist or bigoted approach, and
Yeah,
that's not what he's doing.
right, right.
in Islam, I choose Christianity every single time. I mean, it seems to me to be a fundamentally decent religion, in a way that I think Islam is not.
I think you're going to have to explain why you say that, Professor Dawkins. Why is Islam
Well, the way
fundamentally
that
not decent like Christianity?
yes, I mean the way women are treated. I mean, Christianity is not great about that. It's had its problems with female vicars and female bishops and things, but there's an active hostility to women, which is promoted, I think, by the holy books of Islam. I'm not talking about individual Muslims, who of course are quite different, but the doctrines of Islam, the Hadith and the Quran, is fundamentally hostile to women, hostile to gays. Um, and I find that I like to live in a culturally Christian country, although I do not believe a single word of the Christian faith.
As I was watching this as well, I was thinking of, I wonder how many, I wonder how many people who in the United States, because that's our context,
Right.
who would, do they see themselves as cultural Christians? Do they see themselves as believers? Do they see themselves as believers where they're really cultural Christians? Um, just kind of the same thing. Like we have this, yeah, I mean, there's this feel of Christianity that's our preference. Like you said, like I would prefer to
Mm,
do this,
yeah.
and not really
Mm-hmm.
understanding like the deeper implications of what that looks like.
You know, one of the things I think, he's coming from a different background where Christianity
Mm.
is I mean, he's thinking of Church of England, so
Mm.
he's not that there aren't evangelicals in obviously in England, or there isn't a tradition of that, but I mean there's a difference probably in mindset, and the evangelical mindset particularly, there's decisions have to be made. There's sort of a line that's
Mm.
established that when you cross that line, depending on who you're talking to, you're in a different place. Whereas, I would say even in his mind, of course, what he's talking about is just it's radically foolish. We know that because you can't have your cake and eat it too. You're just going to have you just have one or the other. Either eat it or keep it. Um, and it's like you said, Christians get really encouraged by this. Like, look at Dawkins. Dawkins isn't defending it at all. He says it throughout this video. It's
Yeah.
foolishness. I don't accept it, but I like the effect that it has on a culture, which is actually more about, I think, the fact that it's more of a testimony that even an atheist who rejects all the tenets of what we believe, the things that are core truths, among which he brings up later on, the virgin birth, which, is they have to say is preposterous. And as Christians, we're like, that's just fine with us, but that he still sees value in it, especially opposed to other things. It's interesting. I watched another video that was talking about this video, between, I guess, a guy who's Christian of some sort and an ex-Muslim who's, I think, is an atheist. And the atheist Muslim said, Muslims want to live in Christian countries. Like they prefer to live in Christian countries because they see whether they will say it or not, they see the effect that Christianity has on nations. And I think when it comes to ours in the United States, it's a different vibe because it's rooted in Puritanism originally. It's primarily, although we have a lot of Roman Catholics, but I mean, it's primarily Protestant. I'll just say it that way. And so the feel and the vibe is different. It's what he's talking about. It's interesting because he's, again, from my perspective, I look at this and go, okay, well, even though he sees no faith or no hope, there's still something in there. There's still a
Yeah.
little tiny spark of something, whether he accepts it or not. Now, in the end, the way we would look at that is, what is he choosing? It seems pretty clear he's choosing something that's opposite of what he should choose.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Mhm.
beyond that, what can we say?
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
weird. It's weird to hear him say these things, but
Mhm.
it's not weird, really.
Yeah.
just for balance, should we say something about fundamentalist Christians who, we can see abortion rights, reproductive rights being rolled back in Republican states in America. So Christianity is still not without its problems when it comes to women and their
Well, you
rights.
didn't ask me about Christianity in America. That's a different matter
Okay,
entirely.
all
Um,
right. Well, I'm
but
sure we got some fundamentalist Christians here too, but not as public.
I really like the way I really like the way that you talked about the difference between like Christianity in England in regards to the Church of England and Protestantism and evangelicalism in the United States. Like I think that was really helpful for me because I have the my perception based on what you said and on this video. My perception is that and I'm going to lump you into this. I think I think I think we have more of a desire for an integrated faith
Mm.
into all aspects of our lives,
Sure, sure.
and it doesn't, by what you said and by what we're watching and just by other stimulus that I've taken in, like it doesn't seem like that. It doesn't appear to me that it is as integrated, or at least is talked about as being as integrated as we might talk about here in the US. Is that fair? I mean, am I just throwing them under the bus?
Well, I think the answer, in my opinion, would be yes and no. It's fair mostly because I think there's probably no real difference ultimately between United States and England in terms of Christians. You just have different options and maybe greater options in some areas. I look at, as an Orthodox priest, we have people that come over to the United States from all kinds of places. They come from Greece, they come from Cyprus, I've got a woman from Cyprus, I've got a man from Belarus, his wife from Russia, I've got Ukrainians, I've got people who have grown up with Orthodoxy for 1,000 years in their blood, whatever we want to think about it is built into that culture, and it's built into the people. It's in their genes, and I mean that pretty much literally. Um, in the United States, we have something different, and I think in some ways we purged so much of that out of us that, I mean, it's pretty evident just in the monthly observation of things. You can go to a very secular country and still find that they'll take off, Saint Michael's Day, like the Archangel Michael. That's a holiday for them. They don't even know why they celebrate it, so it's like a big deal. In the United States, we don't have that kind of stuff. We're very secular, probably more secular in some ways than Europe is. But then again, we have this haunting of Christianity in us. So I think what's happening is, I would say this, like getting back to it, like what Richard Dawkins likes is he has a favorite snow globe up on the shelf that's called Christianity. And it makes no difference to his life, but he likes to get it down and shake it every now and then and look at it, and he has good feelings. That's not a bad thing. It's just not much helpful to him. It's like he's got a picture of a meal. Remember how good this meal was, but I have really no interest in it today. Whereas, the Christian wants the meal on the table now, and he wants to eat it now. He's, as I've told people at church, what we don't want is to sort of treat Christ and all of our faith, the faith in Christ, as some sort of like, multi-spice that we can just sort of sprinkle or on ourselves when we feel like we're in the mood for this flavor, and then we leave the place where that happens and we go about our business, so that we can somehow divide our life into spiritual, where I go to get a feeling or worship or receive communion, and then outside of that I'm free to just do whatever other craziness that I want to do, like the host is, decrying, abortion rights, which are just nonsense to begin with, on the wane in the United States. I mean, even that I don't see as a solution. I'm glad to see it, but I don't see it as a solution. So for for what they're both talking about here is a spiritual hobby, not a bad thing, but not a good thing either.
Yeah.
That's what I see. And I don't think it's a lot different between the two countries. It's just one has actually a much longer heritage than the other, meaning England. England's been Christian forever. And for us, the danger, I think, is that secularism that we're just also quickly moving towards.
Yeah.
Well, insofar as fundamentalist Christians oppose evolution and think that the world was created 6,000 years ago, I mean, that is pernicious nonsense, of course.
Right. Well, so I think I see where you come from. I like the phrase, you're a cultural Christian. I think I'm a bit more than a cultural Christian, although, it does, my belief waxes and wanes. Would it be a good thing or a bad thing if we became a less Christian country? And just on the foundation of this nation, with the king being the head of church and state, do you think it provides a solid foundation that we would lose something if, let's say, there was a Muslim majority?
Well, yes. I think the king, when he was Prince of Wales, was actually rather sympathetic towards Islam, and one of the problems I felt. No, I think it would be a terrible thing. And insofar as Christianity can be seen as a bulwark against Islam, I think it's a very good thing. I mean, in Africa, for example, where you have missionaries of both faiths operating, I'm on Team Christian side as far as that's concerned.
It's interesting because I sort of thought that you would be more of a Hitchinite, God is not great advocate. But it's interesting to me that you see the value and the force for good of the United Kingdom having a Christian foundation.
Yes, but I must emphasize that I think that the things that Christians believe are actually nonsense. I mean, I think that when you say you waver, I wanted to ask you, do you actually believe that Jesus had a virgin for a mother? Do you actually believe he rose from the dead? I suspect
well,
you probably
weirdly,
don't.
since you ask, Richard, if I may, because I was at New College when I think, are you still a Don at New College? Yes.
Well, I'm retired.
You're retired,
yes,
but you don't look anyway. Weirdly, I was just 3 weeks ago at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, where the Christians believe that Christ was crucified, or there was the tomb, or the Gethsemane was just there, and Golgotha was there. And I have to admit that there is a real force. I mean, it feels like the fulcrum of three world religions. It really does. And Christianity is palpable there. The place pulses with Christianity. I don't know whether it made me believe the Bible anymore, but I certainly felt that Jesus was a historical figure. Yes, I did believe that.
Well,
am I wrong to
yes,
think that?
No. I mean, that's quite different. But do you believe that his mother was a virgin?
Well, I mean, maybe that was a mistranslation of. Well, that's biologically impossible, isn't it?
Of course it is. Yes.
Well, I mean, I used to make a joke that most second children are virgin births because you can. Anyway, we don't want to go into that.
Yes.
But yes, you know what I'm saying.
Anything you want to comment on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting. She was at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. There, I mean, it's nice to have feelings, and I think there's something to be said about that. I mean, that the fact that it's not a bad thing, but it isn't everything. But it's so weird. It's so weird to say, for both of them, really, to say, or she's trying to stay neutral. But to suggest that there's a power in Christianity that can save England, Britain from the negative force of Islam, and yet say it's all errant nonsense, foolishness, and to not realize how absurd that is, because if it's foolishness, it's basically saying, so we've got two options to pretend about. So we can either pretend that everything that Muhammad has said is true and we should bow to that. I mean, he's probably not just saying two options, but this is definitely the two we're talking about. Or we can all pretend that Christianity, we can pretend he's not saying this, but he has to say this, that is true enough that it's valuable, like there's some truth in it or something in it that makes it better for us than Islam. And it doesn't seem to just be because he likes it more, it's because he objectively says
Mm.
we're better off because of it. But how can you make a statement like that or have that sort of a belief without somehow having the thought in your head, maybe there's something more to this than just it being a bunch of foolishness, which is that's the hard part to put together. Is that, I mean, that's a leap that it's like, how is he gonna, I don't know. You got to make that leap at some point, you know?
Yeah, he's really, I feel like he's really he's putting like kind of painting himself into a corner
Yeah.
in this
Yeah. You think?
yeah. He loves the fruit of it,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't want any of the
You just want to eat it.
yeah, he doesn't
Looks
want
great.
any of the baggage. He doesn't want any of
Yeah.
the accompanying, oh man, I might have to believe in virgin birth, or I might have to believe in this, or I might have to believe in that. Um, and yeah, it is a very, like you said earlier, ears to hear, eyes to see.
Yeah.
This is a very challenging thing because it is someone who just wants a partial piece of this. I think I have to do something really quick. I got to pause
Okay.
on this for a second.
Sure. Should I sing a
Hey,
song?
Joe,
Like,
Joe, I have somebody at our office door, and I got to make sure they can come in. I'll be right back.
yeah, no problem. No problem.
Thanks.
All
Sorry.
right. That's okay. I think there's something else in there too. There was another thought. Seems like I had another thought. It's there's a part of me wants to say we want I don't want to, this is more orthodox probably than evangelical, but I'm not quick to dismiss people when they like if it's so interesting they're talking about these things. And the word is leading Britain's conversation. I was afraid it was like liberating Britain's conversation, but anyway, we figured it out, leading Britain's
Yep.
conversation. But it's weird to think this is something that's being talked about by a well-known atheist on a major British talk show, which I'm pretty sure that's the case here,
Mhm.
about Christianity. I mean, it's just and it's so. But the thing is, it's like when you've pulled the fangs of Christianity, the fangs being the cross, you know, submission to ultimately the teachings of the church of historical Christianity. When you pull out that, then you can just reshape it to fit your paradigm, and then of course you
Mm.
have churches then that just simply follow the culture. So you have them on here obviously trying to somehow square what we would call, let's say, small o orthodoxy with homosexual issues, abortion rights, and stuff like that. Well, obviously we should treat people with love. That's not antithetical to Christianity, but Christianity calls into question the things that maybe so what they're then trying to sort of obviously refashion it. That's where I think everything comes off the rails. But it's still fascinating to hear this conversation.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah. This is,
strange.
I don't think so. I don't watch, like, my news intake is very, very little. I couldn't imagine any kind of conversation
Yeah.
like this on on an American media. Um,
Yeah.
company.
Strangely,
I just couldn't imagine it.
And that's why
Um,
I think it's the interesting difference, because I think in some ways that's become so, in England, it's become so non-threatening.
Mm.
So here it's different. I think it's different. So yeah.
Hmm.
no, anyway, we
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
want to go into that.
Yes.
But yes, you know what I'm saying. Were you pleased that Rishi Sunak talked about Christian values in his? He said Christian values are British values in his Easter message. You seem to be on the same page.
Yes, I didn't hear that,
But that's what he
yes,
said.
I suppose so. But I don't want to be misunderstood. I mean, I do think it's nonsense. But the Christian belief,
I think it's nonsense, but man, I love it so much.
No, it's so
It
he's taking it all apart. He's broken into pieces and he's grabbed the parts he wants.
Mhm.
I mean, today is Easter, and of course, I don't believe that Jesus rose from the dead, and I don't believe you do either. Um, do you?
I do really appreciate this little thing right here that they're
Yes.
like this company leading Britain's conversation,
Recording it for
they're so
free.
professional that they're using some free version of this app to be able to
That's so
communicate.
funny. It cracked me up. I thought it was on my screen when I first saw it. I'm like,
Yeah,
what is this? Anyway, that's funny. I'm glad
yeah,
you
I love
noticed
it.
that.
Okay, I'm gonna hit play.
Do I believe that Jesus rose from the dead? Well, I mean, you're really putting me on the spot. I would like to believe he did. Yes, I
Yeah.
mentioned.
So let me ask you a question. Is that, and I know she's gonna unpack this more in a second.
Yeah.
Do you, and this, do you think that's a reasonable statement of hers? Like, I would like to, like, if you are having a conversation with someone in the United States, if you're having a conversation and you ask that question, like how, like just personally,
Yeah.
how much would you, if someone said that,
Mm.
I really have a sense of one of the thing again, like I know I say this a lot about you. I've really gotten a sense of your pastoral heart throughout this whole experiment that we're running, so I love it. Um, like if someone were to say that to you, like I'd like to, like, do you think that's how big of a problem? And maybe that's not the right word. Like, I don't know. What do you think of that answer?
Well, it's like sometimes people will say, I don't believe in God. I'm like, well, what do you believe about God? And they'll give an answer, and it's like, I'll say, I don't. You would do the same thing. 99 times out of 100, you'd be able to say, well, I don't believe in that God either, because that's not God, you
Sure,
know?
sure.
So when someone says something like that, like, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I thought it was an interesting way for her to sort of dodge it, but not dodge it, but also be a little bit vulnerable. I'd like to believe that. And
Mm,
we have, I have a saying in church too that I got from another priest, where when people are really struggling with belief, being for the Orthodox Christian to be saved doesn't depend so much on my belief. It depends on what Christ is doing.
mm,
Am I willing to say yes to it? And even to some degree, Father Thomas Hopko, who was one of the great mentors, I didn't know him very well, but I knew him a little bit. He would say, you've got to, there's certain things we need to confess and believe. So like, but then there's a point too for some people where this is a side point where I would say to them, well, do you want to believe?
yeah.
Like that's
Mm,
enough. It's enough for God to work with. The other side of the coin, I would say too, with someone like this, I would say, well, would you consider yourself to be a Christian? After them saying something like this, and they would say, well, yeah, she would. I'm almost 100% sure she would say yes. And I would say, but then to be a Christian, by definition, at least the longstanding tradition of this would be that you would confess, for an English person, certainly, or a British person who's probably a part of a liturgical church, that part of that would be to confess the creed, of which is the belief that Christ died and was resurrected from the dead.
mm,
So helping someone to see, like, well, maybe you need to think about that before answering. You have to, because like in our church, if someone came to our church and they wanted to be, they were Orthodox, I'm an Orthodox Christian, and then we had a conversation like, well, I don't believe in the resurrection of the dead, I would say, then you by definition are removing yourself from being a Christian. You shouldn't come to communion. You need to go to confession. You need to think about these things, because this is not what Christians believe. So that, it's depends on the person. And I think too,
Sure.
like, what the conversation was really.
Yeah.
It
Really,
doesn't bother me a lot.
I wasn't either. I like that you used the word vulnerable. And just by the 7 minutes that we've watched at this point,
Mm,
like I think her answer to am I a Christian would probably be um different than the way Richard Dawkins is saying he's a Christian.
mm-hmm.
Like obviously there's more like with him, he clearly believes that it's a bunch of nonsense. And with the interviewer, like she's not so sure,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
is wrestling through that. But yeah, I did really like her answer of I'd like to, because
Yeah.
I'm sure we all have days where um where we'd like to. Where,
Yeah. Like, what is this all about?
yeah, exactly.
The
That's different.
resurrection. I mentioned the resurrection. By the way, just quickly, because I've been told we've got to stop. When my son was 2, we took him to church, and the priest said, "You can ask me anything." And he said that my 2-year-old son asked the priest, "Do you know Jesus to be true, or do you believe Jesus to be true?" And do you see what I mean? And he couldn't answer that question himself. Anyway,
Yes.
or God. Anyway, listen, lastly, just one thing. Does it matter? I'm going to ask you again, if Christianity is a minority religion in this country.
I think it matters from a cultural point of view.
That's a very clear answer from you, Richard Dawkins. Thank you so much for joining us from, I look like New College, but Richard Dawkins, Prof. Dawkins, is the renowned evolutionary biologist, author of The God Delusion.
His answer is probably a good answer. Like, as a country,
Sure.
maybe that's true. It's important on a cultural level. But for Christians, it has to be deeper. I feel that priest, that's terrible. The priest should have done something, that couldn't answer the question.
Yeah.
Why is it? Give the kid an answer, man. Make a mistake, for Pete's sake, that's what
Yeah,
you got to do.
I remember all probably the same time I was reading The God Delusion. Um I was reading something by Brian McLaren, who was like, I know that whole emergent church thing is like gone, which is funny.
So
But
weird,
like,
isn't it?
but he was involved in that whole situation, and he had talked about how when he had been a pastor, someone had come to his office and had asked him a similar question, and like he didn't know how to answer the question, and my
Mhm.
thought was, man, I think my 10-year-old could probably give an answer to that question. Um, and yeah, that is a very yeah, there are answers to questions, and we should answer them. Um,
It's There are times where you have to say I don't know, but those
sure.
shouldn't be. It shouldn't be at something at that basic level. Do you
Yeah,
know Jesus to be true, or do you believe? Well, for the Christian, we can only know so much. So we say I know to the degree I know, I know. But I believe it and I trust in it. And
yeah,
that's what faith is about. So it's like but I think that's actually probably symptomatic of where he was going to church.
hmm
And sadly, that's probably just another estimation of the fact of so much of Christianity has been just gutted, and we're left with, in certain places, in certain areas where the Christian expression exists, it's just a shell. But that shell is waiting for the truth to come back in and refill it. And you look at, any number of, I look at I look at England, and you look at what's happening there spiritually. As an Orthodox priest, I'm like, let's go back and fill in these places with the truth. If they don't want to have church anymore, let's put churches back in, and the same thing could happen here. But
Mhm.
I mean, the whole conversation, it's interesting. It's not, there's still something to work with. At the same time, there's no doubt that what the gospel of Richard Dawkins is empty.
Yeah.
It's hopeful in the sense that even an atheist still retains a spark of something there that he has love for and sees in it, like even he sees it as being superior for reasons that are, I don't know what, to other religions. That's
Yeah.
something worthwhile.
Yeah.
But
I know one of my hopes in watching that, and I shared it on my Facebook page, and one of my hopes in doing this is for the people who may be in like I'm affiliated with, who maybe have a very similar mindset of Dawkins. Like my hope would be that they would come away from that with seeing the emptiness in it and
mm-hmm,
how it really is an untenable position. I mean,
yeah,
you don't really, I don't think you have to think that hard about it to see that it is
mm-mm,
an untenable, but I do believe it probably requires some effort to wade through the Islamic stuff or you know the supposed embrace of Christianity and see it for what it is, which is ultimately an emptiness. So my
mm-hmm,
hope for people so if you're a Westway person or you're a whatever person who has an affiliation with me,
mm,
my desire is that you would see and experience Christianity for the fullness of what it is and see that you can't have it both ways. You can't have the
yeah,
you can't have the fun and the hope of Christianity without Christ. Um, because there's no support for it. And it's
yeah,
actually very empty. And I like you said something earlier. It was like everybody has feelings, or I like feelings, or feelings are good, or feeling like I
mm-hmm,
mean that's true, but it's also not enough. So my
mm-hmm,
hope in people who are going to listen to this, who are going to watch this, is that you would walk away from this time recognizing that it's not enough for you to embrace the things of Christianity or the even the hope of Christianity or the joy of Christianity without embracing like the Christ of Christianity. And I think that that's probably a space where people get wrapped up in is they like all of the I was thinking it like kind of like a friends with benefits relationship.
mm,
Uh, my
right,
hope is
right,
that you would not just embrace the hope and the joy of Christianity without embracing the Christ of Christianity in the midst of this. And I thought that this video does a really good job of communicating that. So
yeah.
those are
I
my
think I think similarly with us, I think it's in the Orthodox Church. I think it's, we start off by doing, and by doing, we learn why we do things. So
mm,
it's a little bit different in that sense. So that's why I can look at this and say, there's hope. I mean, if you can come in, you know, but the sad thing is seeing Christ and not seeing Christ. So for
mm,
us, it's, I will, as an Orthodox priest, I will work with people where they are, but it's a shame when people have the feast in front of them
mm,
but won't sit down and eat. It's a very nice feast. I really appreciate that feast. It's here for you to eat. Well, what's it going to cost me? Well, everything. Well, I don't want to pay that. Well, I get that part, but maybe you can start small. Maybe you can have, you can give a little bit of yourself to this. You can move the chair. You can pick up the fork.
mm,
Um, I think for Richard Dawkins, I mean, it's just a weird thing. It's a weird thing to see it.
mm.
But there's, I look at that still and I still say, well, maybe there's hope.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want anybody to stop there. And I think that's the main thing is that, there's Christ it's not just, we're not talking religion, religion's not a bad word, but it's got to go beyond just nostalgia and stuff like that for it to be something that transforms you. And
Mhm.
it's, God won't stop until we're transformed. That's the whole point. I mean, he's not satisfied until we're completely made new in him.
Yeah.
And that's good. That's a good thing.
Mhm.
I don't know what else to say about it. It's weird because it's like it gets further into this. And we're discussing the idea of talking about cremation. Are we gonna do that in the next episode, or will this
Yeah,
already
yeah,
be?
yep.
Okay, so that'll be the next episode. So like the whole point of trying to draw together the reality, like you were discussing, and I don't want to belabor this because I know we got to wrap up here, but the importance in Christ, talking about Easter, of the physical resurrection of Christ, like the importance of that. Um, an incarnate an incarnate theology, an incarnate belief is the idea that it's more than just up in our head. Like I said on
Yeah.
Sunday in our church, we were talking, it's the second Sunday of Lent, or second Sunday, yeah, of Lent for us, is the longest distance for any person to make towards Christ is to move from the brain, the head, to the heart. So everything we have to move into the heart, where Christ wants to meet us, which is the center of our being. It's where it's because we tend to think like our belief is all up here, but
Mm.
it's supposed to be centered here.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. But this distance, which is only like that far, is the longest distance anyone has to make. They have to move from, Dawkins has got to move from loving intellectually these nostalgic things to realizing like it actually comes alive here.
Yeah.
And he
I
hasn't
like
done that.
that. Yeah, I think that the phrase I was using was integrated, but probably
Yeah.
incarnational is a better,
Yep. Yep.
a much better phrase for that. Because that I think that just more accurately describes um what God's going for. I think what we're going for. Well, this has been a special edition, our first special edition of Two Pastors Talk. Um, I hope that it's been helpful for you, and I hope that it's not just been helpful. I hope it's something that is going to shape what you and the way you think about Christianity, the way you think about your own faith as a Christian, or maybe your own lack of faith as a Christian, or your own lack of belief as a person. Um, and thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. You can like, you can subscribe, you can do all the things. And we will be back. Um, I would say 2 weeks, but it'll be a while because of where we are in our flow. But we're going to close out this season by, I think, talking about death. We're talking about cremation and burial and some of the things and really the value of the body. Um, so we appreciate it. And we will see you next time.